Welcome back. This is our closing session, and we couldn't be prouder, both of the subject matter and of the people who are going to be kicking this around. As I said, I don't know how many of y'all have been able to be with us for the entire 2 days, but as we talked about yesterday morning, one of the places we wanted to start the conversation was on the role of non-commercial media. And public media and public infrastructure in terms of helping support our ecosystems. And where we very intentionally wanted to end is with this conversation, because ultimately, when we talk about Build Back Better, we're talking about generational change. We're talking about who are the voices that have agency to dictate the future of these structures, and how we build a music community that is more just and equitable and fair and resilient. And again, it's going to take some new voices and some new faces and new perspectives to make that happen. So I'm going to actually read from the program frame, because I want to be very sort of specific in terms of how we're sort of framing this conversation. And then I'm just going to kind of turn it over to our remarkable group of guests and just kind of let it roll from there. So question 10, how can youth-facing music initiatives accelerate generational change? Throughout the past 2 days, we've talked about the challenges facing the music community. We've talked about policy and funding, industry reform, greater infrastructure. As always, there's hope. Across the country, dozens of nonprofits and philanthropic partners view culturally responsive music education as a key component for youth and community empowerment. Now, the COVID pandemic, a national movement for racial justice, and our changing political landscape are challenging these groups to rapidly innovate to meet the needs of local youth and to make a stronger case for how creative youth development is, in fact, essential to holistic community development. Together, they will discuss their insights into the future of the music and will showcase how robust and intersectional music programming for youth can shape our society. And they're going to do that all over a period of about 57 minutes. Not an easy task. So I'm just going to throw it open. Somebody jump in and pick up the ball and run with it. Who wants to say hi?
I don't mind saying hi. Hey, everybody. My name is Emeara. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. It's a pleasure being a part of this. But to just start it off, I would say, because I know I'm not going to be able to answer the full question in this one in this one comment. So I'll probably come back around to it. But I would say just kind of talking about that little piece, where you said COVID has kind of impacted us in a way where people are like spearheading the movement for like social justice. And I think, definitely stem from, years past, things that were happening. And then just to see, these murders happen back to back, and then to hear about how COVID was affecting, the minority population. I think that really struck a nerve for a lot of people, and especially the youth, to see I believe, because I'm part of Generation Z. So to see like the millennials, like really going out and being like, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm still going to protest, you know what I'm saying? And still try to social distance, I think that sparked something in the younger generation to be like, well, what can I do? Like my parents won't let me, something like my parents won't let me go out and protest. Like that's going to be a big no for me. So you have these youth deciding to lean into their creativity, and I think there becomes a problem when you have so many youth who want to be vocal and voice, their opinions and their thoughts and their emotions, but they don't have the space, the tools, or the technology to do so in a way that will, really represent them and what it really is that they're trying to say. So I think, different organizations popping up and really being backed to help, reach these youth. I think that's an amazing thing, because then these youth will be able to express themselves, right? They won't they won't be necessarily as frustrated if they're able to get these things out through their poetry or through their playing a guitar or whatever it may be. You know, they get to release that energy in a positive way instead of going and throwing rocks in somebody's window. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like one or the other. So I feel like, you know, this is just kind of showing everybody like, well, we gotta do something. We gotta figure out how do we get, you know, more of these kids a microphone, you know, or how do we elevate them in a way that helps them and not hurt them, you know. So that's just my my little spiel about it. Yeah. Anybody else?
I'd love to follow that up. And I want to make sure it's Emeara. Am I saying that right?
Emeara.
Emeara. Thank you, Emeara,
Yeah.
for kicking this off and like getting us on the right track.
For sure.
Because I just want to echo that. Like, I think a lot of times the specter of adultism is one of the biggest things that gets in the way of older generations actually being able to open up the doorways to advocate for young people and lead them towards power. So like one of the things I think is so important in this, and I think Emeara has like pointed out some of this, is like we need to have a huge amount of humility in order to realize how much we have disinvited young people. We have to have constant criticality, because in any time that we're hoping to renovate, revolutionize anything, we still have to come to terms with the fact that our first teacher is the system that we're trying to eradicate. So with all of these things kind of being said, I feel as though there's a lot of work that needs to be done so that we can make sure that when the young people are using their voices and asking for the tools that they need, that we're listening and we're able to advocate and make that actually happen. And there's like a massive bridge and disconnect in between that. And there's been a lot of times where people during this conference have been talking about how the children are the future. And indeed they are, like, yes, but we aren't making an investment in them in the same way that we would be if we were truly believing that. So if we're really looking at like generational change, that's not a light lift, right? And the beautiful thing about it is if we're actually going to be doing generational change, then we have to make robust pathways towards youth involvement and engagement and empowerment. Because I can't tell you how many times I've participated in calls like this, where people in positions of power and influence have talked about, let's just send the elevator down. Well, what happens when you send the elevator down is you are bringing somebody out of a community of support into an environment where there is no support, into an environment where the culture is actually set up against them. So with all of these things, we need to be relentlessly critical, understanding that without this, we are going to keep on enforcing the very systems that we're trying to dismantle. And I think that's a hard thing to face. I think particularly anybody who's been in education long enough understands that they have to keep on going back to their curriculum and seeing, wait, are my students in this? And I'm hoping that all of us can be doing the same thing. It's one thing to say that we need to be opening our doors and serving our young people, but are we liberating them? Are we empowering them? Are we giving them a seat at the table? And at the same time, are we giving them the skills so they can sit at that table with confidence, skill, and give us like great information and leadership?
Stefan, thank you. And I apologize. I'm getting a little tired here at the end of the 2 days. I don't have the energy I used to as a younger person. But what I need y'all to do, if you could, just introduce yourself and just a little context on who you are as you're talking. We're putting links to everybody's work in the chat and all the rest of that. But just
everybody doesn't know who I am. Everybody doesn't what?
No, especially you, Stefan. No.
No. So Emeara, why don't you go first?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Emeara Burns. I'm currently the program director for the St. Louis Story Stitchers. I'm 22 years old, and I'm a, what do you call it? I just do a lot as far as an artist, you know, instrumentalist, rapper, poet, you know, you name it, I do it. So yeah, and I love what I do, and I love being a part of Story Stitchers.
I am Stefan Brackett. My rap name is Brer Rabbit. I'm out of Denver, Colorado. I am one of the founders of Youth on Record, a member of the band Flowbots, and the Colorado statewide music ambassador. Also a lover of cats and dogs and all things Afrofuturist.
All right, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow. Somebody else jump in. Let's just keep this going. Sage, you're with us. You wouldn't mind saying hi and just kind of pick up the conversation?
Hi, thanks. My name is Sage Bond. I am of the Navajo and San Carlos Apache tribe. I am a singer-songwriter from like rock, metal, blues, and I reside on the Navajo Nation, and I am a student here at the School of Music. So I'm 26 years old. I had a late start, and I can relate to exactly what Emeara and Stefan are explaining, because I am a product of this system, I guess. I never had any like music classes to get me ready for this level. I didn't have music classes in like grade school and elementary school. It's the first thing to be cut, and coming to a university and wanting to major in music and have an emphasis in voice, I felt like out of place when I came here, and I had to teach myself how to sing an opera style so that I could audition for the School of Music. And to the COVID situation, I'm still like a very brand new student, even though I'm a sophomore, and I'm still working on my like rock and metal at the same time as doing like so much. And I wrote a song during quarantine called Truth, and there's a line in the song that I was hesitant to include where I say, "Black and brown, can you bleed for me?" And I had to go back and forth with myself and say, like, is this too harsh? Is this too too brutal to put into this song? But it is the truth, and that is what we need to inspire the youth to keep fighting the good fight and just keep going. So Truth is originally a song for the next generation, and I wrote that song so that I could raise funds for my local community, because during the COVID time, all my shows had been canceled, so no income, and I really wanted to help. And I just felt like helpless at first because I didn't know where I could get these funds to help like hospitals, my local in my community. And yeah, so music was my way to raise those funds.
That's awesome, Sage. We're so happy you're with us. And Derrick, why don't we bring you in? Derrick Tabb from Roots of Music in New Orleans. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your role and what you do at Roots of Music, and kind of how it connects in with some of these other presenters.
How y'all doing today? Sorry I got on a little late, but my name is Derrick Tabb. I'm the founder and artistic director at the Roots of Music. Roots of Music is a nonprofit organization for kids 9 to 14. We basically mentor them, give them a hot meal, transport them to and from the program, teach them music, also get them to go on to further learning with going on to like Nokas and trombone shorties and different high schools to further their learning. We're actually starting off with another part of Roots now, offering engineering program, working with kids in the studio behind the board rather than being behind in the actual studio, in the mixing room. My role, pretty much, I started out as a musician with the Rebirth Brass Band, traveling the world. I've been traveling since I was 11 years old. I started out with the local musicians at first, and then went on to Rebirth. I won a Grammy. I started this program in 2007, basically because I seen the need in New Orleans. Kids were dealing with a lot of violence and just dealing with a lot of things that were life in itself. And I seen that the music scene was not as available to kids as it was when I was young. So I started it with a kid. I knew they had 19 kids that were in need of a program like this. So I took $20,000 and said I was going to put $1,000 per kid for a 6-week program, and I sent a bus out because one of the kids couldn't make the program, and I took $1,000 and sent a bus out, and 42 kids showed up the first day. The following week, 65 kids were there, and the third week we had over 100 kids in the program. So the program pretty much took feet and walk on its own. We started getting everything prepared. We took them to the Rose Bowl. We've played for the President of the United States, Obama. We've done a lot in a short bit of time. We've been here for 13 years now. The kids love the program. Right now, I have about 170, 180 kids in the program. Anything y'all want to ask me?
Yeah, that's an awesome introduction. Thank you so much, Derrick, for joining us. And Dalouge, why don't you kind of
Michael, can Derrick speak a little bit to what they've done in the midst of COVID? Because they are also running almost a quasi social service organization in the midst of this pandemic, along with keeping young people making music.
Yes, to say the least, it's been a trying time this year dealing with COVID, but I have to commend my team. I have the best team in the world, and not to take anything from you guys' team. My team is just great. They really have stepped up to the plate and made it really easy for our kids to stay connected and to really keep going on with their learning. We went on and went straight to the computers and went with the virtual learning, and it worked out for a good bit of time where we had nearly 100% of our kids online. And we know with the changing of the time and schedules of schools, it got a little difficult for that, but we started implementing going to face-to-face learning with our kids 1 day a week, so we can still practice our social distance, still practice, safe COVID tactics, and it really has worked out. So now we're doing both. We're online and we're having our face-to-face with our kids, and they love it. They really, the kids really want to get back to the normal, but we can't. So we're making it work with what we have to work with.
I'll go next. I'm Dalouge Smith, and it's a huge pleasure to be here. It's really humbling to be here with Emeara, Sage, Stefan, and Derrick, because at the Lewis Prize for Music, our role is to support work, their peers' work all across the country in neighborhoods and communities and cities and small towns, rural spaces. We are very new. We made our very first awards in January. Derrick was an awardee in our first year with the Roots of Music of our Infusion Award. And the program that we met Sage through, the Native American Composer Apprentice Project out of the Grand Canyon Music Festival, was also one of our awardees. And subsequent to that, when COVID hit, we were really rapid in trying to figure out what was happening in the creative youth development field and how could we assist and support. We were amazed and thrilled when we realized that the creative youth development sector was not slowing down. It was actually stepping up, and it was stepping up in ways that demonstrated both a deep understanding of the circumstances of community, but also so much commitment to family as well as young people. And so we issued what we called our COVID-19 Community Response Grant. And essentially, unlike so many other funds that went out to the arts and to the music sector, our funds were directly aimed at organizations that were actually doing support for their community. And so in that case, we found the work of St. Louis Story Stitchers as well as Youth on Record. They were 2 of 32 programs that we funded around the country. But I want you to know there are 500, 600, 1,000. I mean, in that COVID response fund round, we got over 600 applications. There are efforts of this nature that are rooting music youth well-being and community integrity happening in every neighborhood. And these really are the source of the next generation of culture makers for our country. Derrick was mentioning, they've got, they're now working with young people to be behind the soundboard as well as playing instruments. And that's happening all over the place. These programs are going into incarcerated settings. They're helping young people who have been incarcerated come out with job skills, getting them placements. They're working with young people who are in mental health facilities or just need mental health supports. It's such a multidimensional body of work, and it doesn't fit in any sort of singular category. And I think the comments we heard both from Sage and from Emeara about what happens when young people actually have an agency and the resources to exercise that agency through music. There was someone in the chat actually asked, like, is this a pacifier? Does this, inhibit young people from activism? I'd love to hear from Sage and Emeara, because I think the fact is it actually matures and kind of energizes and makes even more substantial their activism. So huge honor to be here. So exciting that this is the conversation that's closing the forum's intensive, because I think that the work that's being done in these venues and in these settings is going on at full speed. Their artists are being employed, as we speak. Families are being fed, and leaders are noticing, like civic leaders are realizing that this is actually a fundamental service in their communities, and would love to see the creative youth development sector really link arms with the professional music sector, the way Derrick does in New Orleans and the way that Stefan does in Denver.
That's fantastic. We're so, again, happy to have all you. And, again, this is kind of a little bit of a tricky conversation, because it sort of lives in my head, and I'm not sure if I'm able to be articulate at this stage. But, part of, again, the connectivity across the 2 days are thinking about these issues of sort of infrastructure and what we have the ability to control. And if we take sort of as a presupposition that in the music industry, we don't have a real sense of control. I mean, the music industry has been dictated by evolving technology and the changing role of policy and how audiences engage with music and compensation structures and all these things. And again, I'm not even talking COVID, right? We're talking pre-COVID and post-COVID in this thing. And, again, as I said at the outset, we know that we're sort of inheriting decades and decades and decades of, fundamentally broken and flawed structures in a music economy that fundamentally is deeply exploitative, that is, based on cultural appropriation and corporate control. And we talked again in the session with Barry Lynn about what consolidation has done across our entire economy, but certainly how that's impacted our live music industry and our recorded music industry and our broadcast industry. And so again, the reason we want to get into the generational conversation is that it's going to be, our sort of theory of change on this is it is going to be a fundamental reconceptualization of how these structures should work. And then how do we connect into the things that we need to sort of help accelerate that, make that happen, which can be funding, it can be philanthropy, it can be policy. So I'd like to, if you guys are cool with this, I'd like to kind of dig into that a little bit more. And maybe I'll start with, maybe Stefan, I'll start with you, just because we have such history in terms of our work together on policy issues, in terms of kind of framing that a little bit. And, Youth on Record, again, is an organization that we all hold in such high esteem for many reasons, but on a very practical level, because of your ability to sort of merge nonprofit sort of, very organic sort of, ideas of why you exist and what your mission is, and then taking that into public sector and philanthropic partnership that have allowed you to build infrastructure and capacity. So does that frame even make sense, what I just laid out there? And is that something that you can take and kind of shape into the next part of this session?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm just blown away by your endurance. There's no way I could have done what you're doing, man. So I just appreciate that very much. And yes, the question was very cogent and clear, and I will answer it to the best of my abilities. In many ways, I feel like Youth on Record's approach has not necessarily been novel, but it's just been we're trying to look more to the abundance of need as opposed to the framing that there's so few resources. And I think that that approach has also led us to looking to many different sectors and seeing where they can all come together and connect and create a network of support for our young people. So we were finding through a lot of trial and a lot of error that just relying on just the traditional nonprofit methods were not sufficient. And at that point in time, like it felt as though we were pushing a boulder uphill, talking about the importance of the arts and even more so the importance of youth leadership. And some people didn't get it, to be perfectly honest. So we had to start looking into different ways to make this happen. Our excuse could not be, oh, we just couldn't get funding, so there's no opportunities for you young people. So in this, we started this line of inquiries like, well, what about the private sector? Okay, well, what about social enterprise? Can we maybe make it so that like our actual programs start paying a bit for themselves? Can we work with the Denver Housing Authority? Like, like when we started finding that there's actually a lot of people who are waiting in the wings to support, but just had to be presented with a solution that actually helped make this world a little bit brighter. And so for us, we have been like stumbling through and like refining this process of public, private, individual donorship, grassroots leadership. All of these things are necessary for what we kind of have like this holistic approach. If we're really trying to like change, like our main line is we're not trying to make the next like Grammy awarded musician. We're trying to use music as the delivery method for liberation. Music is where young people are right now. Music is an opportunity for young people to explore what's going on in themselves. And then in that, gain the vocabulary to speak their world. That is the same kind of mechanism that you would use if you're training somebody to speak their mind and their position as an activist, as a business owner. And it's one of the things that's been interesting about this time in COVID is with the great disruption and interruption of the music industry, it's allowed all of us to take stock and be like, well, how much of this was serving our students anyway? How much of this industry is almost predicated on strip mining communities of color from their IP and giving them pennies on the dollar? What are other ways and alternative systems that we can kind of build up that lead to ownership, community wealth, empowerment, pushing back, like putting down taproots in a community so it can push back on gentrification? Those are the kind of things that I feel like COVID has kind of opened up this box that we need to start asking those questions so we can possibly maybe even have an industry, or even more important, a resource that truly serves our communities and doesn't just extract them and toss them away. So in that same regard, that's why our approach includes so many different sectors, because I think you need to have that many people at the table to truly renovate this decrepit and often toxic system.
Emeara, I see you nodding. Do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, everything that he was saying was great. And I was just thinking, like, you know, if we don't know our history, then it's going to be kind of hard for us to build a foundation, you know. So I think it's really important. And I think a lot of, not all, but I think it's a nice number of youth, you know, jump into this thing and they only know, you know, 5 years of rap music or something like that. You know what I'm saying? They don't know like really the history of it or any genre really. They don't really know the history of it. They don't like, you know, and it's just, you know, a lack of knowledge, you know. They probably don't know they should be going to look back, you know, until they get like a certain age. You don't really think about, you know, well, who is this and who is that? But with that being said, you know, I think the founders of Story Stitchers, I think they kind of seen that, and not just like with the music side, but just with the overall character of a young person and an artist. So when they started it with, you know, youth and mentors that they could ask these questions to, that they could look at how they handle, you know, the business side of it all, and things like that. Sorry for my background. I'm sitting outside, but you know, and just I think that's a really good way to help a youth. You know, like you said, you're not just trying to make a Grammy winner. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to like really teach youth, you know, something tangible. You know, you want them to walk away with something that they could carry on and that they could leave for the next generation, you know, because I I've just from, you know, watching social media and just watching other people's stories, you know, a lot of times, and I'm not, you know, I hate to like, you know, speak down on anything, but a lot of times, you know, with the rap culture, and I'm speaking about rap because that's what I do, you know, um, with the rap culture, you know, it's all about the fancy things, the lights, camera, action, and you know, now it's starting to come out like, well, when I'm done with this deal, I don't have any money. You know what I'm saying? Or like I'm worse than what I was before after this deal is over, you know? So like starting the youth off with more knowledge about, you know, the actual business side, I think is a really key thing because, you know, we just go in it and just, you know, just kind of think like, oh, I'm just gonna write about my feelings, and that is great. You know what I'm saying? I believe it's really great for us to get that out, but I think we need to, you know, definitely focus on the character of the youth. You know, give them better role models. You know, give them something to mimic other than, you know, what they're seeing on TV. You know, give them tangible goals to reach. You know, instead of trying to get $1 million by the age of 20. You know what I'm saying? Like set them career goals, like set a new standard, you know, build new boundaries for the youth, you know what I'm saying? Or help them to build new boundaries and goals that are tangible. You know, sometimes we go into this thing and we don't even know that we're supposed to have goals, you know what I'm saying? Or what that even looks like, you know? So, yeah, for me, it's just like, you know, especially being with Story Stitchers, it's just definitely just having that mentorship is very key because that's going to help, you know, that's going to help keep the youth grounded because it's going to humble us and show us what has come before us, you know, especially if we have mentors that are in the music industry or whatever industry, whatever creative arts it is that we're pursuing. If we have mentors in those areas that's been there for 10, 15, 20 plus years, you know, that's really going to humble us and make us sit down and watch, you know what I'm saying? And like take it in, you know, take it in and then, you know, create from that, you know, so that gives us some type of foundation instead of just running into it, you know, half blinded, I feel like. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to say about that.
That's awesome. We've got some great questions in the chat. Really appreciate everybody coming into the Q&A. And I think this one is really important, building off of, I think what everyone's been saying, which is, yeah, how do we change the public perception of youth music work from, oh, that's so sweet, to like, no, this is essential? Is that, anybody have a take on that?
Well, I
Derrick, how do you do that? I mean, like, you know, I've seen, you know, I've seen Roots kids perform, you know, I've been part of retreats where we get to, you know, watch the kids and it's like, oh man, look at those kids. It's so great. And, you know, but there's something deeper going on here that we need to think about, right? Other than just kids making awesome music.
Well, you know, what I've learned is people see what their first impression. That's what they. So if they see a bunch of kids, like we've always had the great honor of being a disciplined program. So them seeing kids being disciplined and always being able to stand at attention, do what they're supposed to be doing, that gives the public that perception that they can do anything off the top. And a lot of kids want that. They want that fame. They want that yay. They want that hooray. So when people give them that attention that they're seeking, if they're doing the right thing, we found that they'll keep doing the right thing. They'll go forward with trying to do better at whatever it is that they're doing. If you're playing a horn and they get the hey, that's the kid, that attention that they want, that they're seeking, then they try to do better, even better the next time. And I found that, you know, just piggybacking off of what they're saying with like our role models and things like that. If we have the best role models in place to get the kids to doing the right thing, then we're going to see a difference with our kids eventually, where they're doing the right thing and going in the right direction. But the people see what they see at the time. They see little kids and it's cute what they're doing, they're going to encourage it. And sometimes it's for the best. You know, a lot of times they encourage a lot of dancing. I'm not with a lot of the dancing that go on for the little kids. But right now, that's some of the stuff that's happening. You know, I have to learn to change with the time, you know, and, you know, they encourage it. But you find that little clap encourage kids to go home and practice more dances, to go online and learn more moves and learn how to do more stuff, just that one little clap. So I pretty much love when people acknowledge the kids and see them and give them that push, that drive that they need to keep going forward.
Yeah, and just going a little deeper on that, Derrick. I mean, as an outsider, I push back if this isn't if you don't agree with the sentiment, but it's always part of what I've loved about Roots of Music's mission is it's also, I mean, it's about cultural continuity, it's about tradition, brass tradition, it's about the way New Orleans changed after Katrina, it's about all the Brooklynites buying up real estate. I mean, getting people back in the neighborhoods, and so you've got these layer upon layer of things that you're addressing through the prism of this tradition.
Yes, Roots. I try to make Roots multi, where it catches, first of all, crime prevention. I take kids from all over the city and bring them to one common ground. I call it the neutral ground because I try to be in every part of the city. We've moved five different places, and the 5 different places is pretty much not a ward for the city. So we have 3rd ward, 4th ward, 5th ward, 6th ward. The places that I try to put Roots is not a common ward. Right now we're in Emeara, it's not a ward. So the kids can't claim a ward there, first of all. And you bring them to a common ground, you make kids become friends before they're enemies. And you have where they become brothers and sisters in a band. So right there, you're dealing with one entity of our problem, crime prevention. Then you have where you're teaching them and you're getting volunteers not from just the community, but from college, kids that's gonna really enforce what they're learning, enforce what they're doing, and they're gonna see their paraphernalia, their t-shirts, their college, they're gonna hear the fun that they're having in college. It's gonna inspire them to wanna go to college. It's all in one. It's not just a marching band program. It's a lot of entities that brings a lot of people together, that, the families get together. We have parents, but we have things for the kids, and all the parents are now coming together. Where we making a community effort to teach these kids the right thing, and we all be mentors to these kids. And not just, I remember the days when our parents, we couldn't go down the block without somebody else's parent chastising us, being on top of us, and making sure that we're going down the right route. And now we have gotten away from that. I think by us not having a community, per se, like we used to have, where everybody know everybody, they got away from other people being able to guide your kids in the right direction, that we have to bring it back to us knowing our kids and knowing our community and really embracing our community.
So I want to kind of talk a little bit about Lewis Prize from the standpoint of, one of the things that it strikes me that funders in philanthropy do is not only do they help build infrastructure and write grants and help support organizations that need support, but also they have a sort of big picture, insight into a whole sector, because a lot of people are coming in looking for aid, looking for assistance. And so, what has the experience been doing this work with the prize? And even more importantly, think about the next several years, how can the sort of resources that are necessary be brought to bear, not just through philanthropy, but through other means as well?
Sure. Wow, there's a lot there. That's what we're doing every day. So like, I'll answer it. So first of all, just a little bit more background on the Lewis Prize for Music. We award 3 $500,000 accelerator awards each year. And then we are also awarding smaller awards and grants. And so the reason that we're giving those $500,000 awards, and we're giving them as multi-year awards, is because we believe there are folks in communities using music as a social change and equity building pursuit. And we can't fund all of them. They are in every community. I don't want it to sound like there are only the 3 that we gave last year. That is certainly not the case. They are in every community, but like any philanthropy, we have limited resources. But our ambition really is for these exemplars to help change the conversation locally and nationally around what and how does music live in the lives of young people? How does cultural transmission, what does that look like in communities when we have a music education system that is essentially built on orchestra, choir, band, and those are rooted in a very particular historic tradition and culture? That's if it's even in the schools. That's even if music's in the schools. And one of the statistics that I know my colleague Ariel mentioned yesterday during the funders panel is the percentage of young people who received arts education in 2008 compared to 1982, that percentage dropped by 1% for white kids. That percentage dropped by 50% for kids of color. So inequity is again, as Stefan was saying, like, it is built in, it is baked in, it is fundamentally doing its job. The inequity that's been designed into these systems is achieving the output that it's there to pursue. And the work that we're supporting is a counter to that, and in our view is really the next generation of music education. Like, this is a session about next generation. We shouldn't talk just literally the next generation of young people. We need to talk about the next generation of music practice, and how is it that the folks that are doing these activities in their community, where, as Derrick's describing, the musical traditions that he's focused on with his young people are New Orleans musical traditions, and the musical traditions of Los Enzontles that we support in California, those are Mexican American musical traditions. And we're seeing that all over the country, that these programs are very locally based, very rooted, and yet there is a kind of universality to the outcomes that are happening in all of these communities when young people are given these opportunities, and they're given a whole range of other well-being supports, including love. Like, we just have to say up front that when you are in these spaces with the adults and the young people, love is alive. And without it, I don't think this work would be as powerful as it is. And so at the Lewis Prize, like, in a sense, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring a great big spotlight onto these efforts that are about defining the future through youth voice, youth leadership, systems change, and collaboration. And we don't think any one of these organizations is going to do this work on their own, that they have to be doing it within a network and within an ecosystem, which is, I think, what also relates to the work of this conference. And in fact, these young people, like, I've been sort of chewing on, what are all the ways that the young people in these programs can be invited into the kind of side-by-side experience that Emeara was just describing in musical venues, in recording studios, and vice versa. How can the professional artists in the community come into the spaces where the young people are gathering on a regular basis? And this is what CYD programs are doing every day, but they can't do it on their own. And so the Lewis Prize is really focused on bringing attention to this work so that the future of music in this country is representative of this country.
And I think it's important, again, to connect to the things we've been talking about for the last 2 days. And again, I want to be really clear that when we talk about the framing of this conference being 10 questions, like, I don't have the answers. I don't know anybody here feels like we've figured out collectively how this all fits together. But it is important, I think, to note that, in America, there's always money, right? I mean, it's a question of who gets the money and how the money is invested and how the money is invested effectively, and we've just come through, an election cycle where I think $14 billion was spent on political campaigns, and a lot of that was through small dollar donations. And we're going through a period where the government is likely to spend another $1.2 trillion in terms of economic relief and stimulus packages. And so the whole notion of how are we aligning our resources in ways that are going to be the most impactful is really, I think, the challenge that we all have. And again, I want to be really clear. And again, I'm outside, like you all are the experts on this. So I don't know. There are a lot of dynamics that I'm not privy to that I don't understand or necessarily need to understand. And I know that putting money into institutions that aren't ready for money can be super problematic, right? So it's not just like we got to write a bunch of big checks and then we're wash our hands of it. But I do think when we talk about this change in administration, when we talk about the people who are coming into government, when we talk about the sort of way that philanthropy and public sector are rethinking a bunch of these things. And again, we think about the sort of holistic value that the nonprofit organizations organically are bringing to their communities. I mean, I think there is that through line to resources and to capacity building. And, certainly our hope is that, through not only through sessions like this, but, really being intentional over the next couple of years about, how do we connect some of these dots? And I think to the point, there are groups, there's so many groups that could have been in this conversation today that I feel like are probably not networked in at a level that would maximize the effectiveness of the sector. So the musicianship here in DC doing amazing work around marching band culture in DC. Totem Star in Seattle, Vera Project in Seattle, groups in Albuquerque, in Tucson, mariachi culture, et cetera. So we do have some awesome questions. I want to make sure we get to some of these. Sage, I don't know if you would have a take on this one. I open for anybody, but Sage, if you'd have maybe some thought on this, but just, what do youth need to prepare them for rebuilding this creative economy in this industry? Like, what are the things that are missing that you feel like would be important and helpful to kind of put you in the kind of strongest possible position moving forward? That's a great question from our audience.
Oh, thank you for that question. I feel like so my shining light was NACAP. I was introduced to classical music through the Native American Composer's Apprentice Project, and it's seasonal. So like once a year, I get to compose a piece for a quartet, and I had never heard, I went into that program not knowing how to read music or write music, but with imagination, and was encouraged to just break all the rules. And then later on, we input those rules of music theory into that, my composition. But if I had this resource, imagine if NACAP was something that schools could have year round and not just selectively picking out students and recruiting, but an actual program for students to just create and I guess put their energy into something other than dying over homework. And I if I had these resources when I was younger, I had the encouragement from my family. They were so supportive, and they're still supportive. They gifted me my first guitar, and it's just I wanted to learn so much more about music and how could I develop and hone my craft. And there's no teachers around, or there was teachers, but they didn't like what I played, like classical guitar, and I wanted to play metal and really get down my technique, but there was very little sources for that. So I turned to local music, and that's where the music scene comes in my community, and shows where there's native metal bands and there's country bands, and there's a huge country following in our community. So I actually started out in a country band, and that was I don't like country. That was my like my first step into like getting on the stage and pushing myself out there to like finally like work towards my goal of becoming a performer and working on my craft, I guess. And then like dabbling in all different types of genres, but I didn't have that outlet in school, not until like maybe my senior year in high school, and then I had to graduate. And yeah, my construction teacher, he was the one that would play guitar with me during lunch, and he was teaching me like Pink Floyd and Stone Temple Pilots, and we would get more students to come in and bring their guitars, and we would all spend our lunch just in his classroom, even though he's not a music teacher, but he was the closest thing we had. And it was great. He was a great part of my like starting my career. And NACAP also, I guess, like helped me figure out what I want to do with my education. I came out of high school, just community college, the closest place to home, and then came here to the university, which I have to drive 2 hours to get to. This is the nearest place that has music to like from my home. So 2 hours here, 2 hours back home, and I'm tired all the time. And living on campus was great, and then the COVID happened and I had to move back home. So now everything is hectic again, more hectic than before, trying to do voice lessons online and not actually being with my teachers and everything. And also being like starting with the COVID stuff, that also revealed that not the Navajo reservation suffers from bad internet connection. I can't do classes there, and I have to drive 2 hours to get like the good Wi-Fi, and not every student on the reservation can be online. So COVID is affecting their education. Like, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sage. So I want to go around and ask each of you, and if you don't feel like you want to answer this, you can just say punt, and that's fine. We won't hold it against you. But, you know, so again, in this conference, we've had 2 days of conversation about, again, policy and changing the industry and building our, you know, our community media structures and thinking about funding. And so, you know, the delegates who are participating in this work for cities, they are researchers, they work in the music industry. I mean, they're just a whole cross section. What are sort of 1 or 2 things you would ask these people to think about, both in terms of organizations like the ones that you work with and the ones that are in their community that they may or not be engaged with, that over the next couple of years, and again, I don't want to, I'd sort of like to take this out of COVID context. I know it's kind of hard to, right? I mean, you know, because obviously the needs are so dramatic right now with what we're going through collectively, but thinking again, pre-COVID and the fact we're going to be post-COVID, like, what do you want to tell these people to pay attention to do? Like, what are the asks for them? Because they are all signed up for duty. Everybody wants to help. They want to know what can they do next that would be most useful. Does anybody want to take a shot at that one?
I always say, okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I always say getting involved with the program always works. You know, when I say get involved, being more visible, you know, being there. If you're asking for inspiration, there's nothing more inspirational, anything that'll inspire you more than to see the people that you look up to right there with you. The thing that got me most inspired about playing music was it was always in my front door. It was always there around me. And I feel like if the music industry wants to get involved, you know, they have a lot of stars that, you know, are right there that just, they show up, they inspire a whole school, not just one person, when they just show up there. And not to say they get involved with something that the kids are doing. So I would always ask for, you know, more attention from the bigger our audience of coming to see what we're doing, and then it brings value to all of our programs because, kids have a lot of other things they could be doing. And if they don't know who's going to show up at any given time to your program, they're going to always want to be there. And they're going to, then you can ask a lot more from them. The kid if they always want to be, I say, we have a jump zone that we have down here in New Orleans, it's in Metairie, and they do very little advertising. But all the kids want to go there. You can ask a kid, bring me an 8 in math, and I'm going to take you to the jump zone. And that kid going to bring you an 8 or come as close as possible to bring you an 8. So I feel like if we had that kind of place where kids want to come to, that they can come to for free every day, and we offer the stuff that we can ask for anything that we want. If we want an 8, we can ask for that 8. If we want kids to do better in certain subjects, and even in music or whatever it is, we can ask for that with no problem if we have the facility that they want to be at. And that's what I always feel like, if the artists help out by just being present. A little bit of time, 20, 30 minutes, I don't think it hurt anybody, but it inspires a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to piggyback off of that. And to Derrick, what you said earlier about, rebuilding community. Well, because that's something I bring up a lot when I'm in other meetings and on other panels, is how, for me, it's hard, hearing a lot of my elders that are like, 50, 60, 70, talk about how, if their parents were gone, like, they still were good because their next door neighbor, would be watching, watching out for them and everything like that. And just, just knowing everybody on your block, like, to me, that's kind of foreign, Only person I know on my block is my next door neighbor. And that's crazy to think, that it was like that. But I definitely feel like, building that community with other organizations and kind of teaching how to do that, because in some places I think, there's this stigma where it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to, partner, or they don't know how to partner with other organizations just in their region. I think that could be a great thing too, like maybe looking into how to, bring more like-minded organizations together to build that community. Because I think once you start doing that, like, you have Story Stitchers, we go out into the community and perform in like open lots and stuff like that. So if you have multiple organizations doing things like that, that's bringing the community together. Story Stitchers is performing on the north side of St. Louis most of the time, and a lot of people over there know us. And then you got another organization that's performing a lot in South City. Y'all come together, you got two different ends of the city, come together, people networking, getting to know each other, and seeing like, oh, we are very similar. Like, what I'm saying? No matter our color, no matter our age, we have a lot of similarities, The pain we feel is about the same, the joy we experience is about the same, and that, I feel like that would be how we lower crime rates, what I'm saying? Because people will start to care for one another, people will start to, Miss Smith down the street, little Johnny is not gonna want to kill her grandson because he cares for Mrs. Smith. Like, what I'm saying? Like, he look at her like that's his grandmother, what I'm saying? Like, so how do we like bring these organizations together to help build our community? Because I do think that is a major thing too. Is like, if you don't know nobody, how are you gonna care for them? And and if nobody care for you as a young person, it just makes you feel like, well, I can do whatever and it's not gonna matter because my life doesn't matter. So I think community definitely is something that we should be looking at, is how to build that part of our cities and our regions.
So good. We're coming close to the close.
Can I
but
quickly?
Please, I'd love to hear some more closing thoughts.
So at the Lewis Prize, we have started to talk about systems change is actually built on relationship, and that's basically what Emeara was just describing, right? It's the human connections that we have become the new model. And so, your question, Michael, is, what do people in this sphere do? I mean, I would say the very first thing you do is you talk to everybody on your team and you find out what kind of music education are your kids getting or not getting. And I'm talking, if you're a venue, I'm talking the security guards. I'm talking the kitchen staff. Like you will find common cause in your own intimate community first. And this field has proven that it can mobilize fast and big, but can it mobilize close? Like, to me, that's the kind of fundamental pivot point, is this becomes about your whole community when it's about the people that are closest to you, and then the new people that you are welcoming into that space. So that's my request, because I think this is a music passion world already. Like, this group of people is music passionate. And how closely can you share that and its ripple effect with those that are the most in proximity to you?
So smart. Stefan, any closing thoughts on your side?
Yeah, just one. So for one, I just want to thank all of y'all for all the incredible work that you do. It's amazing just to meet you. And just like in the spirit of all this, some things are just kind of coming up about in this moment, if we aren't if we're looking at these problems that are happening, so many of the solutions are actually not clearly laid out. And to Dalouge's point, there actually aren't relationships with the people within the community who actually probably have the solutions. There's not relationships with them to actually come to these solutions. We find this in philanthropy. We find this in advocacy. There's a missing step. There's a risk in trying to invest in developing leadership from youth, from communities. There's a lack of practice or even like best steps to create that. And I feel as though like we are missing out on so many Derricks, right? And then like, what else are other things that like we're not getting from Derricks? Like, are we getting enough data around all of the incredible things that Derrick is doing? Like, I think to answer that warm and fuzzy cute question, I think if we had all the data on how like Derrick is pretty much saving his parts of New Orleans, people would get rid of that warm fuzzy thing immediately. Cause it's like, oh, kids are staying out of prison. Kids are like, are finishing school. Kids are learning professional skill sets. Kids are saying they don't hate school. Kids are having like positive relationships with Black men. Like any of these things that we're like looking for, hunting for, searching down, like he's doing it. But at the same time, are we getting him the resources to be able to document that, to get the data, and like so we can start learning from those best practices? And then how do we even go earlier than that? So I feel like for the people on this call, to your question, Michael, there is this missing gap about like how do we start developing leadership, giving tools, and like being able to like to raise those leaders up. Because like what we see too often is like we cherry pick. We have a talented 10th type thing. We bring up a few organizations, a few leaders, and we let them like starve on the vine. So in this, I just feel like there's a great opportunity for imagination, for all of us to start looking like, okay, well, what are the gaps? And then who are the people who are already there? And how do we start like elevating them so we can start getting some really robust bridges? Because like COVID and anything else is showing us we need to get these bridges. We need to get these gaps covered. And workshops and webinars like this, voices, brilliant people like this, it heartens me. And I'm just hoping that we can all be less risk averse and a bit more experimental. And then being bold and supporting anybody that we're taking down that path.
Amazing. And Sage, any closing thoughts or anything you'd like to share as we wrap up the session?
No, thank you guys for having me. I'm just glad to be here. This is a great opportunity, and you guys are all amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much to all of you for everything you do, for bringing your A game to this conversation. I'm thrilled that our decision to end with this was the right one, very clearly. And I think we have a lot to chew on. And